As you can tell, if you've listened to the last podcast and just jumped into this one, that talking on a podcast versus giving a lecture or writing something scientific or formal, that there is a mixture here of personality with content. And it has been a struggle of mine to process through that in a way that I think makes sense, but it is so different that I'm kind of struggling right now with how to do this. I took a swim last night. I live in a RV park, and I live in an airstream trailer in an RV park. I'm single, and I decided to go for a swim. I met a guy there, and we got to talking, and the conversation went real deep real fast. And it wasn't me, it was the other fellow that wanted to talk about politics and religion and all sorts of things, and I didn't have a problem with it. At the end of the time together, when I was heading back to my trailer, we said goodnight, and he smiled and he said, he travels all over the world. He is a businessman, and he has been in multiple countries. I have too, but he's been in more than I have. And he was saying that one of the things he does is he goes to the topics that seem to be the most controversial and gets them out in the open. And he said, if I do that, then people can decide if they want to talk to me or not. And there's full disclosure. And I thought, wow, that's really opposite from my approach. My approach is to be friendly and nice and quiet and listen and try and gather what I think people would want to hear. I think I'm a little more cautious, and he was just a little more bold than I normally am. But I'm going to take that thought that sometimes you just have to lay it out there and just say, well, this is who I am, and this is how I process things. And I think when you do it that way, if I'll do that with you, I'm going to process through things like lectures of experts that I've listened to and topics I've read and things that have come that are important to me. And in fact, if you look at the intro, the artwork of the podcast, I talk about chronic inflammation. If we get into chronic inflammation, I'm going to walk you into areas having to do with cells and bacteria and viruses. And right now we're in the middle of this COVID thing, and we're all pretty aware of coronavirus and all the rest of it. It's become a part of our common vocabulary. But normally these kinds of topics, COVID-19, SARS, these kind of terms are just scientific terms and things that we use in science to describe virology and describe bacteria and the response to how our bodies respond to insults like bacteria and viruses is through an inflammatory process where our body mounts defenses that sometimes come back to harm us if they're overdone. And we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about chronic inflammation and how periodontal disease is a chronic inflammatory process. But to get there, right now, we're just getting to know each other. And so I'm going to tell you, I am a spiritual person. I believe in Jesus. I'm Christian. I don't know that it's necessary that anybody has to agree on any of those things, but it's a full disclosure thing to say I believe in God. I believe in the Bible. And I think that there are things going on in our society today that are countering that. And regardless of how you feel about these kinds of topics, I think at full disclosure, you got to know who you're talking with. I'm not going to couch things, and I'm not going to proselytize per se. But you have to know where I come from and why I think the way I think. I think in order for you to get anything out of it. So the other thing I'll also say, I'll finish with this podcast, is to say, I don't think about a week ago or 2 weeks ago I would be talking to you as I am right now. And the change was the fact that Google and Facebook pulled down some videos put out by physicians having to do with hydroxychloroquine and the fact that they believe it's useful and helpful to patients. It isn't the fact that we know one way or the other as to what they're saying just because they say it. Nobody does. The problem is when certain groups are pulling down and censoring information that has to do with the areas in which I operate. I become very concerned. In other words, I want to be able to provide you, patients, with the best that I have, but I can't provide you care if things are being shut down and closed off to where I can't learn and know and be able to evaluate things. And just because somebody says something doesn't mean everybody automatically believes it. I think we have to be discriminating in our determining of what is right and what is wrong. But if somebody says something that I don't think is correct, if I get upset over that, there's something deeper in me that's going on there. That if somebody can't say something that conflicts with what I believe and not have it create some effect in me that's emotional and causes me to react in ugly ways, then there's something seriously wrong. And I have now come to the opinion that full disclosure is the best thing that we all can do. Talk about how we are, what we think, and not couch it and be so quiet and passive that people are not able to discern what it is we think. So that's it. Until next time.